Good evening. The National Association for Advancement of Colored People is the largest, oldest, and strongest civil organization currently in the United States. NAACP, for short, significance is to ensure educational, political, social, and economic equality all over the world. NAACP has its hands on being so dedicated to nonviolence and in racial discrimination so that equal rights could begin correctly. This outstanding organization began February 12, 1909, in response to ongoing violence. Overall, the NAACP was created to work for the termination of discrimination in housing, education, employment, voting, and transportation. For instance, we have Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter and NAACP both correspond with one another. They are exactly the same. They both want to focus on African American rights, more so nonviolent situations, justice for all, equality, racial disrespect, and segregation. There were a few movements that went about, such as the Niagara Movement, which started in 1905 and was led by Webb Dubois. Niagara served as the purpose to put an end to segregation and discrimination in unions, courts, and public compromises, as needed. According to Webb Dubois, who is an activist, a scholar, and the founder of this wonderful organization. Then there's Great Depression, which occurred in the 1930s that allowed NAACP to come about. According to African Americans, the Great Depression was a disaster, which gave the association the audacity to confront and point out criticism. The NAACP began to focus more on economic justice and more. Eleanor Roosevelt, known as the National Board of Members of Colored People, met to convince Franklin Roosevelt to outlaw jobs of discrimination, as well as defense industries and organizations created by New Deal. New Deal was called the Response for Relief. Roosevelt agreed to open thousands of jobs for African Americans after being threatened by our organization leaders with a national march on the Washington movement that occurred in 1941. They fought with us trying to get our voices heard, fought rights, peace, justice, and finally our social changes. In addition, their mission was to defeat hate, vote. As you shall, vote. This will help people of our colors step up and let our voice be heard. Here we have pictures of Black Lives Matter and some of the founders. Some of the founders were Ida, Webb, Henry, Mary, Oswald, and William. The Niagara Movement had a few things wrong. African Americans ignored by the progressive era, still restricted from voting, large scales, and violence. By the NAACP, multiracial and forced on race relations. They wanted to fix every movement they went about. And then we have Great Depression, where they said it was a disaster. You had African Americans sitting around without food or water. And lastly, we had the photos from the National Walk on the Washington movement, which was threatened by NAACP leaders. And lastly, to defeat hate, you must vote. Thank you.